Why are junta-held African nations being attacked? Is the external power behind the attacks trying to prove the leaders are incapable? Recently, Mali has been attacked, and not long ago Burkina Faso was attacked too. So, why are the junta-held nations on the radar? What's the game being played? Let's find out. Mali, a country with a history of political instability and insurgency, witnessed a significant event on September 17, 2024.
A rare double attack has jolted the junta-ruled nation of Mali. Al-Qaeda-linked group JNIM unleashed terror in the capital city of Bamako. The JNIM claims to have carried out a special operation. Now, the first attack was at a military training center and the other on a military airport.
In the early hours of the morning, coordinated attacks targeted two high-profile locations, a gendarmerie training center in the Faladier district and the Modibo Keita International Airport in Bamako, the nation's capital. This marked the first major assault on the capital since the military coup in 2020, which brought Colonel Assimi Goïta and his junta to power. It sent shockwaves across the country and raised alarms internationally. The attack was not just any violent outburst, it was meticulously planned and executed to send a clear message. Around 5:30 a.m., when the city was still waking up, gunfire erupted and explosions were heard in the distance. At the airport, the engine of the presidential plane was set on fire, a symbolic act meant to humiliate the government. The airport, a key infrastructure for Mali's connectivity to the world, became the epicenter of destruction as insurgents aimed to cripple a vital point of national pride. Meanwhile, at the Gendarmerie Training Center, attackers engaged in a fierce battle with security forces. This facility, located in a strategic part of Bamako, was of great importance to the government, as it housed elite units responsible for maintaining order in the country. The attackers aimed to breach the defenses and cause as much damage as possible, not just to the infrastructure but to the image of the junta, which promised to bring stability and security to Mali. The timing of the attack was significant. On the same day, the junta was set to open a major trial regarding the corruption surrounding the purchase of a presidential plane. This trial was seen as a symbol of the junta's efforts to tackle the rampant corruption of the previous regime. However, instead of focusing on this promise of reform, the country was left grappling with the biggest security breach in years. Although the army swiftly regained control and neutralized many of the attackers, the symbolic damage was done. The country, already struggling with internal divisions and threats, now faces a new level of insecurity. The incident highlighted not only the operational strength of the insurgent groups, but also their ability to strike at the heart of Mali's capital. It demonstrated a shift in their tactics, moving from rural insurgency to direct attacks on highly fortified and symbolic urban targets. The events of September 17, 2024, marked a turning point for Mali, one that could have far-reaching implications for the junta and the country's future. So, who has claimed responsibility for the attacks? The JNIM, an insurgent group with deep roots in the Sahel region, swiftly claimed responsibility for the attack. JNIM has been a central player in the ongoing insurgency across Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger. Their claim of responsibility came just hours after the attack, with the group boasting about the enormous human and material losses inflicted on the Malian military. According to JNIM, the operation was a specific and well-planned strike against the Malian military and its elite gendarmerie forces, which they framed as part of a broader campaign against foreign influence in the region. While the Malian government has yet to provide an official death toll, local sources indicate that dozens may have been killed, with many more injured. The targets of the attack, the airport and the gendarmerie training center, suggest a focus on crippling Mali's security apparatus and sending a message to the junta that their hold on power is far from secure. But who is really behind these attacks? Here's a reminder to please like and share the video and subscribe to our channel to watch more videos on Black culture, history, civilization, and identity. Let's continue now. While JNIM claimed responsibility, the group's ability to carry out such a large-scale, coordinated assault raises suspicions about external involvement. Insurgent groups like JNIM are often not isolated actors. They operate within a web of external support, both financially and logistically. This support can come from foreign governments, individuals, or networks seeking to destabilize regions for their own political or economic gain. In the case of Mali, the involvement of external forces cannot be ruled out. The country's strategic location in the Sahel, a region rich in natural resources, makes it a prime target for foreign powers looking to exert influence. The withdrawal of French troops from Mali following the junta's rise to power created a power vacuum, one that insurgent groups are now exploiting. But there may be more at play here. The attack's timing, just as the junta was set to begin its high-profile corruption trial, suggests a potential attempt to discredit the new government and undermine its efforts to root out corruption and restore order. The relationship between insurgent groups and external actors is often murky, but in the case of Mali, there are strong indications that foreign powers may be pulling the strings behind the scenes. Insurgent groups like JNIM thrive in unstable environments, and external forces may be using them as proxies to maintain control over a region that has long been the subject of international competition. The attack on September 17th could be seen as part of a larger strategy to weaken the junta and keep Mali dependent on foreign military and financial assistance. This leads us to a question. Why has Mali become a target for attacks after the military coup? Did the external forces behind these attacks dislike the new junta? Since the 2020 coup, Mali has been in a state of political and military flux. Colonel Assimi Goïta, who led the coup, promised to stabilize the country and restore security. However, the reality has been far more complicated. The military government has struggled to control the insurgency, which has only intensified in recent years. But why have these groups become more aggressive since the junta took power? And are there external forces influencing this escalation? One possible explanation lies in the junta itself. Goïta's government has been outspoken in its desire to distance Mali from Western influence, particularly that of France, which has had a long and controversial military presence in the region. The withdrawal of French troops from Mali, a move championed by the junta, has left a security vacuum that insurgent groups like JNIM are eager to exploit. However, the withdrawal has also created tensions with external powers, who may not be pleased with the junta's direction. Many experts believe that the attacks are not just the work of insurgent groups, but are also influenced by external actors who have a vested interest in destabilizing the junta. These forces could include foreign governments, private military contractors, or even multinational corporations with interests in Mali's natural resources. By undermining the junta's ability to govern, these external actors can maintain control over the region's valuable resources and keep Mali reliant on foreign aid and military assistance. The timing of the September 17th attack, coming just as the junta was set to begin a major corruption trial, raises questions about whether external forces are trying to weaken the government's legitimacy. By creating an atmosphere of chaos and insecurity, insurgent groups and their backers can erode public confidence in the junta and pave the way for a return to foreign intervention. The junta's desire to chart an independent course for Mali may be seen as a threat to these external powers, who have long benefited from the region's instability. In this context, the attacks can be viewed as part of a broader strategy to topple the junta and restore a more pliable government. Whether these external forces want Goïta removed entirely or simply weakened enough to force him into concessions is unclear. However, what is evident is that the attacks on Mali are not just the work of local insurgents. They are part of a larger geopolitical game, one in which the future of Mali hangs in the balance. Now we need to join links. Burkina Faso, under the leadership of junta leader Ibrahim Traoré, has faced a similar surge in insurgent attacks. Like Mali, Burkina Faso has been plagued by insurgent groups operating in the Sahel, many of which are linked to larger international networks. But the question remains, why are these attacks happening now, and why are junta-led governments in particular being targeted? The answer may lie in the broader geopolitical context. Both Mali and Burkina Faso have taken steps to distance themselves from Western influence, particularly that of France. Traoré's government, like Goïta's in Mali, has been vocal about the need for greater African sovereignty and the reduction of foreign military presence. This shift towards self-reliance has not gone unnoticed by external powers, many of whom have long-standing interests in the region's resources and strategic positioning. Junta leaders in both countries have also made moves to strengthen ties with non-Western powers, such as Russia and China. This realignment of alliances threatens to upend the traditional balance of power in the region, one that has been dominated by Western interests for decades. By fostering instability through insurgent attacks, external forces may be seeking to prevent these governments from consolidating their power and pursuing policies that could weaken Western influence in the Sahel. The attacks on both Mali and Burkina Faso can be seen as part of a larger effort to keep these governments off balance and prevent them from fully asserting their sovereignty. The surge in attacks on African nations led by junta governments may indeed be a sign that these leaders are successfully frustrating external powers. By rejecting foreign military bases, limiting foreign exploitation of resources, and pursuing policies of economic and political sovereignty, these governments are pushing back against a system of control that has long dominated the continent. However, this path is fraught with challenges, as evidenced by the escalating violence. One of the key questions facing these governments is whether they can continue on this path without succumbing to the pressure from both insurgent groups and their external backers. The temptation to return to the status quo, where foreign powers dictate the terms of governance and security, will always be there, especially in the face of mounting attacks. But to do so would be to abandon the very principles that these juntas claim to uphold. The solution, then, is not for these governments to leave power, but to address the root causes of the instability. This means confronting the external forces that are fueling the insurgency, whether through financial support, military aid, or covert operations. It also means building stronger, more resilient state institutions that can withstand both internal and external pressures. African nations must also work together to develop regional solutions to the security challenges they face. The African Union and regional bodies like ECOWAS can play a crucial role in coordinating efforts to combat insurgency and reduce foreign influence. By fostering greater cooperation between African states, these governments can present a united front against external interference and build a more stable and prosperous future for the continent. In the end, the only way for Africa to truly free itself from external control is for its governments to stand firm in their commitment to sovereignty and self-reliance. This will not be an easy task, but the alternative, remaining under the thumb of foreign powers, is no longer acceptable. The recent attacks may be a sign that these governments are on the right path, but they also serve as a reminder that the road to true independence is long and full of obstacles. By confronting these challenges head-on, Africa can finally break free from the chains of external control and build a future that is truly its own. In all this comes a statement from the West. The narrative coming from many Western governments and media outlets in the aftermath of the attack is clear. The instability in Mali and other African nations is the result of poor leadership by junta governments. This line of reasoning, though subtle, carries a powerful implication. If the junta had not taken power, perhaps the country would not have descended into such chaos. It's a message that aims to weaken the credibility of these military regimes by suggesting that the root cause of violence is internal mismanagement rather than external interference. But is this narrative accurate, or is it part of a broader strategy to undermine these African governments? To understand what's at play, it's essential to look at who benefits from this portrayal. The West, which has historically maintained influence in many African countries, especially in former colonies, has seen its sway diminish in recent years as more African nations turn towards self-reliance and reject Western military presence. These junta-led governments, especially in Mali and Burkina Faso, have openly challenged the long-standing Western presence, with Mali even expelling French forces from its territory. This rejection has naturally led to discomfort in Western capitals, which have relied on these relationships to exert geopolitical control and economic advantage in Africa. By framing the attacks as a consequence of junta rule, the West is subtly or not so subtly laying the groundwork for a return to the old status quo, where African nations depended on Western military support for stability. If these governments are seen as illegitimate or incompetent, external forces can justify their intervention, positioning themselves as the solution to a problem they may have helped create. For locals in Mali, Burkina Faso, and other junta-led nations, it's vital to recognize that this narrative is not just about addressing insurgency, it's about control. External powers have long sought to maintain a foothold in Africa, often through military bases, economic dependency, and political influence. The more chaotic these nations appear, the easier it is for these powers to step in under the guise of helping or stabilizing the region. But history has shown that this so-called help often comes with strings attached, strings that limit African nations' sovereignty and ability to dictate their futures. In this light, it becomes clear that these attacks are not just random acts of violence. They are part of a larger, more complex geopolitical game, where external actors, often using insurgent groups as proxies, seek to destabilize governments that challenge their influence. By making these governments look weak or incompetent, they can justify renewed intervention and regain the control they've lost. So, should locals understand this as part of a larger plot? Absolutely. The people of Mali, Burkina Faso, and other African nations must see beyond the immediate chaos and recognize the broader power dynamics at play. The attacks, while devastating, are not just a reflection of internal weakness. They are also a sign that these governments are on the right track in pushing back against foreign control. The more these attacks intensify, the more it suggests that external powers are feeling threatened by the junta's efforts to break free from their influence. As for the question of whether locals should continue supporting their junta governments, the answer depends on what these governments represent. If the junta is truly committed to sovereignty, transparency, and improving the lives of its people, then local support is essential. However, the support must come with accountability. The junta cannot merely rely on anti-Western rhetoric to justify its rule. It must deliver on its promises to improve security, reduce corruption, and create opportunities for its citizens. Ultimately, the decision to support the junta or not rests with the people, but they must make this decision with full awareness of the external forces at play. The attacks and the narratives surrounding them are not just about insurgency. They are about the future of Africa and who will control it. The people must decide whether they will allow external powers to dictate their future, or whether they will stand by their governments, flawed as they may be, in the hope of building a truly sovereign and self-sufficient nation. Who do you think is behind all the attacks? Have you found the real culprit? Are these the leaders who are trying to save Africa? Let us know in the comment section. Is someone very familiar to us behind all this? Do you want to watch more videos like this one? If so, subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon next to it. We have decided to bring videos on something nobody talks about: the Black culture, civilization, history, and evidence about how glorious Blacks have been. Thanks for watching, and until the next video, stay tuned.